Hey everybody, welcome back. DIY Dad here. We've got another problem to solve because, well, it's kind of what we do. So this is the entryway at my house. It's the front door and the door to our garage. And over there is the laundry nook that I built that has the washer and dryer in it that we use quite a bit. So what we don't have is a good spot for guests to come in and sit down and take off boots and things like that. And we're coming into winter. What I do have is that little cubby thing, and you can see the crazy mess that it leaves and all the clutter that it tends to gather. So I'm going to take that out and we're going to build a bench that will allow us to have little cubbies for the kids to put their shoes and stuff like that in, gloves, all of that, and a place for our guests to sit down, take off shoes and boots in the winter, things like that. So pretty easy project from what I have in mind, at least. We're gonna design it as we go, make it look similar to that, and hopefully functionally replace that, and off we run. So as usual with my projects, I'm starting off with a sketch. This is roughly the thought that I have in mind. This is going to be essentially a box supported by a couple legs on the side with a butcher block countertop piece across the top. We're going roughly 4 feet for the overall width, and then I'm gonna do a 1-inch overhang, so the inside will be a bit smaller than that. This sketch was based on using 4x4 legs. I think I'm gonna use a 2x2 instead. It'll still be as strong as I'm gonna need it for the use that this thing is going to get. So, roughly, what I'm gonna look to do is this. So I have a chunk of shelving, and just bought pre-finished shelving. It's actually over there that I'm gonna use for this. And then I've got some pieces that will kind of cut out of this so I can have essentially a shelving box that's supported by these 4 legs. I'm going for an overall height of 19 inches. My top is 1.5 inches thick. It's actually a chunk of this butcher block countertop that I'm gonna rip down the length, so it's only about half as wide. We may use the other half for a back, not quite sure yet. So I have that material. I also have the pieces I need. So I have one piece of 8-foot 2x2, so this is 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. I have a 4-foot shelf that is 15 3/4 inches wide. That's going to be the backer that I have for this. Then I have an 8-foot shelf that is 11 3/4. That's going to form the main structure of the box. So the first piece we're going to cut is this one, just to get our kind of main support in place. So I'm going for a 48-inch total width, and despite what's written here, these are 1.5 inches square. So if I go 1 inch off the overhang plus 1 inch of this and kind of just have it overhang the shelf by about kind of 1/2 inch just to make it look interesting. Actually, I think I'll go a full inch. So there's a 1/2 inch that doesn't overhang. That makes sense in a second. Essentially what that means is we're going to take 1.5 inches off of the total width of this. So 1.5 inches, 1.5 inches gives us 3 inches. I want the total thing to be 48. So we're going to cut this shelf to 45. So I'm going to take this very first 8-foot shelf and I'm going to cut it down to 45 inches in width. Just to keep it simple and quick, I'm going to be using a skill saw for these cuts. So essentially I measured from the end, brought it down to 45 inches, made a mark, and then I'm going to use my square to draw a straight line. My square is obviously not big enough, so I'll just flip it over to the other side to complete the line. And then I'll use my skill saw to cut that off, and this will be my very first piece. Okay, first piece is cut, and then just as a kind of an artistic thing with this, I am going to inset the legs a little bit. So what I'm gonna do, since the piece I've got for the legs is 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches, is I'm gonna use my square and I'm gonna mark off a 1-inch square here and just use my jigsaw to cut that out. That way this will notch around the leg and let the leg stick out an additional 1/2 inch around the edge. Then I can do pocket holes essentially to secure this to the leg eventually. All right, all 4 corners are cut, and just to kind of show the look that I'm going for here is essentially this. So now that those are in place, I'm going to use the remainder of this board and I'm going to cut the verticals for the storage section. Now my storage bins are 11 3/4 inches tall, so I'm going to be cutting these at about 12.5 or so, just to give us that extra room for things to slide in and out and not have it too tight. This is the one piece of the design build that is pretty reliant on the bins that you're using. So if you're using a different type of basket, you'll want to measure that to make sure you give yourself enough height to allow it to slide in. Don't get things too close for comfort. My vertical risers are cut at 12.5 inches. You can kind of see the design concept here. I'm using the finished edge on the pre-finished shelving kind of towards the front. I'm going to use pocket holes screwed from the inside, so these will come up and sit on either side of the basket, and then I have enough space for another basket here and there, so I can have my 3 baskets inside of the legs. I'm going to then cut another piece, sort of once I've got this done, that will go here, just to close in this end, and I'll do the same thing on that side, and then my wider piece of shelving will get cut down to the 45 inches and then ripped down the side so that it's the same 12.5 inches tall. That will then get hooked onto the back here to close this all in. Actually looking at it, I might do it at about 13 inches tall, and I'll just run it straight down so that this piece can toe into it as opposed to going the other way. So I'm a big believer in these videos of showing you my actual process, and anytime you do a design build, you're subject to kind of learning as you go. So I made a mistake. I'm gonna be able to cover it and you won't be able to tell when I'm done, but if you're following along and trying to build this bench and you're trying to be artistic with this little offset, don't do what I did. When you're cutting the back hole, instead of running it at 1 inch by 1 inch, you need to actually leave enough room to accommodate for the back of this so that this board doesn't stick out too far, and I'll show you what I mean. So I'm kind of test fitting this just to get a feel for how it was going to look. This is a scrap of my narrower board, that's why it's not going up all the way, but it's the same thickness as my other piece of shelving, and you can kind of see the issue that I have here is if I place my leg in so it's all lined up, that backer is going to stick out too far. So in order to get this flush, what I'm going to have to do is put a little spacer piece in there, about a 1/4 inch wide piece, just to fill that gap. Now when I close this all off and paint it, you're not going to be able to tell, but if I had test fit some of this before, I wouldn't be dealing with this now. So I'll need a little 1/4 inch gap filler on this side and the other side for the back. That's going to let me have this back sit nice and flush. I also measured, and the actual distance from the top edge of this piece kind of down to the bottom for my back portion is going to be 13.25. So I'm going to rip that down to 13.25 and get it cut to width, kind of measuring from the inside edge there to inside edge here, so it'll sit across and form my backing piece, and then I'll get those little fillers in place, and we'll pretty much have a box that's ready to be assembled. All right, back piece is cut. I actually have the back portion laying flat with the bottom coming up now, because the next step I'm going to do is to cut pocket holes in the bottom of this piece going down towards the back, and I'm going to do probably about 5 of them along the length, and then I'll screw those 2 together so that that's nice and tight, and then we'll measure out and do the divider pieces as well. This will then get flipped back over and we'll have the basic structure of our box. At that point we can look at connecting the legs to it and then getting ready for the top. To attach the uprights then, I did 2 pocket holes going down and 2 going back. I measured from the inside edge of what will be the leg for the table to here to make sure I had enough width for my baskets to sit. Did the same thing for this and for this to get it kind of balanced out. So really measured from the outside on the left and the right, and then this one will be slightly wider, but I mean like by 1/4 inch, so it's not going to bother me too much. And once I got that measurement done, I used my square and marked a straight line so I can make sure that this was plumb, lined this up on that line, and then used my corner clamp to hold this in place while everything got screwed in. It's super stable. So the next step then is going to be dealing with the legs and getting those cut and ready to attach. At that point, it's just going to be ripping the top down and getting everything ready for final assembly. So to attach the legs, what I'm going to do is build each side of the legs as a sort of module and then piece it together. So I took the remaining piece of our 8-foot shelving and I cut it into 2 pieces that are 12.5 by 10 inches. 12.5 gets us the height of the back, and then the 10 inches is the distance that will be between the two legs once it's fully assembled. I'll then take each of my legs, which I've cut to 17.5 inches, and those will get attached directly to this backer board. I'll do that for both sides. I'm gonna then paint these legs before I put these on, so it'll be a whole lot easier to do before it's assembled. And then once this is all white and ready to go, that will get attached onto the side here and screwed into the back and screwed into the bottom. At that point, all we gotta do is put the cover on. My legs are painted. Unfortunately, it's very, very humid today. So I have to wait for those to dry, and it's taking a very long time. So while that's drying, I'm gonna turn my attention to the top. Now this thing is about 12 3/4 inches wide, and I want my overhang to be about 1 inch all the way around. So I'll cut this at 14 3/4. I'm gonna let it run the entire width. So I set it so I can use the whole thing. All I have to do is rip down the side, and then we'll see. I'll probably just sand it off. I might use the router. I'll kind of see how it looks after I've got it cut. To do that, I'm just gonna use my skill saw with a guide on it and run it down the side. Countertop is cut. Now I'm going to use my router and a 1/4 inch roundover bit just to smooth out the side and the front edge so it's more comfortable when we're sitting on it, getting shoes on, that sort of thing. After that, I'll sand it down and then stain it, and hopefully by the time the stain is dry, the legs will be dry and I can kind of look at putting this thing together. Although, as I'm saying that, I'll probably throw a couple coats of polyurethane on the top of this as well. So assembly may have to wait till tomorrow. We'll see. This is what the assembled leg assembly looks like. Essentially, I've got my end piece, and it's screwed into both sides of the leg. And then I have 2 holes here that will screw into the top. And then this assembly attaches with these 2 points, as well as this point and that point up there. So all attached, it looks like this. And all my screws and everything are hidden on the inside, where you won't really see them once this thing is in place and has all of its boxes and it is on its legs instead of being on its top. Now, a couple things about attaching this. I did put a towel down just to protect my stained butcher block top. I haven't polyed it yet. Once it's fully assembled, I'll be doing that. And if you're keeping count, this brings us up to a total of 36 pocket holes in this piece of shelving, rather, to turn it into this bench. Well, it's actually been a couple months since I did the last portion of this video, but I wanted to check in and finish this up. This is our entryway bench in its final form. We've been using this thing every single day for the last probably 3 months, and it's been great. So each of the kids has a little basket here with stuff in it, so their shoes and all sorts of that kind of stuff. All goes in there. Fits nicely, it's sturdy. This is where our kids put their shoes on in the morning. It's where they take all their stuff off when they come back from school, and they typically leave it piled all over it, but then we move it back to where it's supposed to go, and it's been great. A few finishing things I did. I had a little bit of the beadboard left over that I used on the doors in the laundry room, so I've got that here as well, and the 2 spaces kind of work together with the same finish and look here in the entryway. And that's going to wrap up this project, which means we're at the end of another DIY dad video, and I owe you a dad joke. So, where is the best place in a hospital to find people playing hide and seek? In the ICU. Remember, the most important part of any DIY project is just to do it. It doesn't have to be perfect. Most people will never see the flaws unless you point them out to them. Have a great day. We'll catch you on the next one.